So in terms of age-related changes, I'm first going to talk about some changes that occur to the innate immune system as we age, and then some changes that occur to the adaptive or acquired immune system. And so to start with innate immunity, the number of both neutrophils and macrophages, which are those phagocytic cells that are important for innate immunity, actually remains constant with age. So there's no decline in the number of neutrophils or macrophages. But what does change is their ability to function as well, right? So neutrophils, which are the sort of circulating phagocytic cell that circulates within the bloodstream, experience a decrease in their ability to phagocytose and break down potential invaders. They lose their ability to find the site of infection and move towards it via chemotaxis, so their chemotaxis decreases. And they experience some changes in migration based on a decreased capillary density, right? So as the blood vessels that are required for neutrophils to move within change with age, it becomes harder for them to migrate, right? And so it might be because the blood volume decreases or blood flow decreases, but neutrophils do require some of those capillaries, and therefore, as they decrease in density with age, it can be harder for neutrophils to just get where they need to go in order to exert their effects. And the same sort of functions are decreased in macrophages, which are sort of the phagocytic cells that are sitting in tissues waiting for invaders. They also experience a decrease in phagocytic function with age, and they lose a bit of their ability to produce those small cytokines and chemokines. And you remember that cytokines and chemokines are important because those are what actually help neutrophils find the sites of infection. And they also promote other parts of the inflammatory response, which is important for innate immunity. And so when macrophages can't secrete as many cytokines and chemokines, that means that the innate immune response goes down. And so in terms of what happens to the acquired or the adaptive immune system, there are some pretty dramatic changes here as well. So we're going to start by talking specifically about changes that affect T cells in the adaptive immune system. And so T cells are made in the bone marrow, but they mature or they undergo kind of their final differentiations in a gland called the thymus gland, right? And so with age, the thymus gland actually undergoes a massive atrophy or a massive decrease in size. And you can see that reflected here in this graph, right? And so this doesn't occur later in life. This actually is sort of a steady decline happening about after age 10, right? And so this is just looking at the thymus weight in grams and how that decreases proportionally to time. And by the age of 70, the thymus gland size, or the mass, declines to up to about 90% of its original mass and size, which is pretty significant. Which means also that there's really not a decline in the amount of naive T cells or in T cell development in the in the bone marrow, but there's a decline in the place or the tissues where they can choose their fate, which is potentially problematic for the adaptive immune response. And so what you can see here is actually what happens inside the thymus gland and why it becomes sort of harder for the T cells to find a place to differentiate. If you took a thymus gland and then did a cross-section right through the center, faced it towards yourself, this is what it would look like. So there would be sort of empty space or paravascular space in white, and then actual useful tissue where T cells can be maturing in pink. And what you see as the thymus organ kind of ages, that perivascular space or that empty space increases in size and gets filled up with adipose tissue or fatty tissue. And the usable space in the thymus gland, or the pink part, declines a lot. Right? And so T cells just don't have as much of a place to develop. And that leads to a couple different changes. First, it leads to kind of a change in the ratio between memory T cells and naive T cells in the circulation. Memory T cells, as you remember, kind of are stick around after an infection, right? And so once they're memory T cells, that's it. They can't choose a different fate at that point. And so no matter what happens to the thymus gland, those memory T cells are going to remain in the circulation. But now there's a sort of decreasing number of naive T cells as well as other T cells generated by the thymus gland. And so this change in the ratio could affect immune function. There's also a decrease in the ability of T cells to turn into helper T cells. That's one other age-related change. And there's a decrease in the overall production of naive T cells in the bone marrow. Right, and so overall, there's less naive T cells made. There's less of a place for them to develop. There's less chance of them being able to develop into helper T cells, which can activate B cells ultimately. And so all of these changes can actually decrease the adaptive immune response quite significantly with age. Okay, and then in terms of what happens to B cells in the adaptive immune system, there are some similar changes here as well. So there's a decrease in the production of B cells in the bone marrow, which leads to a change in the ratio of memory B cells to naive B cells in the circulation. Less naive B cells being made, memory cells not being degraded means there's going to be more memory B cells than naive B cells available to kind of become plasma cells and make antibody. There's also a decline in the ability of B cells to kind of become mature and become sort of take on that antibody producing form. And in addition, when we're looking specifically at, B cell function, the release of antibodies from an older B cell declines compared to the release of antibodies from a younger B cell. And the antibodies themselves can also decline with age. So both the quality of the antibody, or how strongly it binds to an antigen, as well as the number of antibodies circulating can decrease with age, right? Which can lead to a decrease in the adaptive immune response. Right, and so a combination of sort of a change in the phagocytic potential of the cells of the innate immune system, and then a decrease in the amount and the function of the lymphocytes in the adaptive immune system together really exacerbate kind of these changes in the immune system and result in a pretty dramatic decline in immune system function in older individuals.